My sister Rowan didn't just break my phone. She pulverized it against the kitchen counter while screaming that I was obsessed with tracking her life. She played the victim perfectly, weeping to our parents that I was a creepy sister who recorded her every move just to sabotage her engagement. My parents, as usual, didn't ask for my side. They just watched in silence as Rowan shoved me toward the door, her eyes flickering with a sharp, triumphant grin I'd seen 1,000 times before. But when I tripped during the struggle and hit my arm against the marble island, a sharp, white-hot pain flared up that felt like more than just a bruise. At the ER the next morning, the doctor didn't just find a fracture. He froze when he saw a strange, metallic shadow on my X-ray that shouldn't have been there. "Avery," he whispered, his face going pale. "This isn't an old injury. It's an active transmitter, and it's been stitched into your subdermal tissue for months." That was the moment the world snapped sideways. Rowan wasn't afraid of me recording her. She was terrified I'd find out she had been the one recording me. While she was calling me sensitive and dramatic, she was literally living inside my skin. I didn't call her and I didn't cry. I just looked at the detective standing in the doorway and realized that this time, the joke was finally over. And Rowan was the one who had just run out of places to hide. Before the story goes any further, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is in your world right now. To understand how a piece of military-grade hardware ended up under my skin, you have to understand the invisible war I've been losing for 20 years. In the Dalton household, Peace was a performance and my sister Rowan was the director, lead actress, and sole beneficiary. We were born only 18 months apart, but in my mother Marlene's eyes, Rowan was the sun and I was merely the dark space required to make her shine brighter. I grew up in the cracks of her personality, learning early on that my role was to swallow small hurts and sharp comments so that Rowan's magnetic presence wouldn't be disturbed. Rowan had a talent for what I call the soft erasure. She didn't just bully me. She convinced the world I was too fragile to survive without her. If I tripped, she was the one who caught me, even if her hand had been the one to nudge my shoulder. If I lost my keys, she was the one who found them in the most unlikely places, always whispering, "Oh, Avery, what would you do without me?" My mother loved this narrative. To her, it meant Rowan was a saint and I was a liability that needed constant supervision. "Avery is strong, she can handle herself," Mom would say, which was code for, "Avery is a nuisance, and Rowan is the only one patient enough to deal with her." This dynamic became dangerous 3 years ago, during the aftermath of our Aunt Eleanor's funeral. Eleanor had been the only one who saw through Rowan's mask, and in her will she left me her historic Victorian estate, a property worth millions and intended to be a sanctuary for my quiet soul. Rowan was livid. To the family, she pretended to be happy for me, but I started noticing a shift. My health began to decline in ways I couldn't explain. I felt constantly watched, even when I was alone in my locked apartment. I would wake up with small circular bruises on my arms that Rowan would dismiss as clumsiness or iron deficiency. "You're becoming paranoid." "Avery," she would laugh, that light, sharp sound that always made me feel like I was losing my mind. "Maybe the house is too big for you. Maybe you're just not competent enough to live alone." She was gaslighting me with the precision of a surgeon, and my mother was her primary cheerleader. Every time I tried to voice my concerns, I was told I was too sensitive or dramatic. It's a terrifying thing when your own family teaches you to doubt your own pain. The surveillance wasn't just mental, it was physical. Rowan became obsessed with my safety, insisting on taking me for wellness retreats, where she would insist on giving me vitamins or helping me with my skincare routine. I remember one night, after a particularly heavy sleep induced by a tea she had made, waking up with a stinging sensation in my upper arm. Rowan was right there, smiling, telling me I'd walked into the doorframe in my sleep. I believed her because the alternative that my sister was physically altering my body to keep tabs on me was too horrific to contemplate. She used this insider knowledge to sabotage every part of my life. If I had a job interview, she'd accidentally mention a scandal at that company that would make me withdraw. If I started dating, she'd find a way to meet the guy and warn him about my fragile mental state. She wanted me isolated, weakened, and entirely dependent on her, so she could eventually manage the Victorian estate for me. She was waiting for me to break so she could step in as the hero and take the one thing Eleanor had kept out of her reach. By the night of the phone incident, I was a ghost of myself. I had started carrying my phone everywhere, trying to record the weird noises I heard in my house or the way Rowan would change her story from 1 hour to the next. When she saw me holding that phone, she didn't see a sister. She saw a threat to her 20-year masterpiece. She smashed it not because I was recording her, but because she realized I was finally looking for the truth. She thought that by breaking the device in my hand, she could keep the device in my arm a secret forever. She didn't realize that her violence was the very thing that would finally lead me to a doctor who wouldn't accept her excuses. The golden child had finally pushed too hard, and the cracks in the reflection were about to expose the monster underneath. The silence in the emergency room didn't feel peaceful. It felt heavy, like the atmospheric pressure before a devastating storm. While the hospital hummed with the routine chaos of a Tuesday morning, I sat on the edge of the exam table, the paper gown crinkling beneath me every time I shivered. My arm was throbbing, a deep, rhythmic ache that seemed to radiate from the exact spot where I had hit the Marble Island during the struggle with Rowan. Dr. Hanley, a man with tired eyes but a steady hand, was looking at the digital monitor with an expression that shifted from professional curiosity to profound clinical concern. He didn't speak for a long minute, his eyes tracing the jagged fracture in my radius before centering on a small, perfectly rectangular shadow nestled deep within the soft tissue of my tricep. "Avery," he began, his voice dropping into a low, cautious register, "I need you to tell me exactly how you got this scar on your upper arm." I looked down at the faint, circular mark I had ignored for years, the one Rowan told me was from a night terror incident. I told him the story I had been coached to believe. But Dr. Hanley wasn't nodding. He stepped closer, pointing to the X-ray. "This isn't a piece of shrapnel or a medical implant. It's a sub-dermal RFID transmitter, the kind used for high-end logistics tracking. And according to the scan, the internal battery is still active." The room tilted. The mirror paradox was finally shattering. The person I thought was protecting me from my own clumsiness had been the one surgically ensuring I never left her sight. I felt a wave of nausea so violent I had to grip the sides of the table. "You mean someone is watching me?" Dr. Hanley didn't answer directly. He picked up the wall-mounted phone and requested a forensic nurse and a security lead. "This is a mandatory report. Avery, someone went through a great deal of trouble to put this inside you while you were incapacitated." While he waited for the team, I pulled out my tablet, the only device I had left after Rowan smashed my phone, and logged into my home security app. I had installed a hidden camera in the kitchen months ago, terrified that my paranoia was real. I scrolled back to the night of the phone incident. On the screen, I watched the golden child transform. The video didn't show a worried sister trying to help a sensitive sibling. It showed Rowan systematically searching my purse while I was in the bathroom, her face cold and clinical. When I walked in, she didn't just smash the phone. She looked over her shoulder toward the window first, checking for witnesses, then shoved me with a calculated, feral strength that was meant to cause maximum damage. But the real power flip happened in the footage after I fell. Rowan didn't rush to help me. She stood over my prone body, pulled out a small handheld scanner, and ran it over my arm. She smiled when it beeped. It was the smile of a predator checking the collar on its prey. Before I could process the horror, the door opened and Detective Carver stepped in, her posture unyielding and her eyes sharp. She took one look at the X-ray and then at the footage on my tablet. "Avery, we've already intercepted the signal," she said, her voice a flat baritone. "The transmitter is pinging a local IP address every 60 seconds. It's registered to a private server hidden inside a Victorian estate, your estate." My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. Rowan wasn't just tracking my location. She had set up a command center in the house Aunt Eleanor left me, turning my sanctuary into a digital cage. The escalation hit its peak when my mother, Marlene, burst into the exam room, her face a storm of indignation. "Avery, Rowan just called me hysterical. She said you're telling the doctors lies about her again." She stopped mid-sentence when she saw the detective and the glowing X-ray on the monitor. Detective Carver didn't waste time. "Mrs. Dalton, we are investigating a felony-level assault and illegal surveillance. Did you know your daughter Rowan had access to sub-dermal tracking technology?" My mother's jaw tightened, but for the first time, she didn't have a dismissive script ready. She looked at me, not with love, but with a dawning ghostly horror. It was for her own good, a voice rang out from the hallway. Rowan stepped into the doorway, her pleasant facade completely drained, replaced by something sharp and unmasked. She didn't look at the police. She looked at me with a narrowed, trembling rage. You're too pathetic to be left alone. Avery, you were going to ruin Eleanor's house, ruin our reputation. I was just making sure you didn't wander off the rails. She lunged forward, pointing a shaking finger at my arm. You ruined everything the day you were born. You think you're so perfect? But you're just a broken toy I had to keep fixed. Detective Carver moved instantly, stepping between us as Rowan began to unravel in real time. That's enough, Carver said, her voice cutting through Rowan's scream. As the officers moved in to cuff her, I didn't feel the weight of the family loyalty anymore. I watched the golden child thrash against the consequences she had spent 20 years dodging. The machine in the basement was finally coming up for air, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one who was afraid of the dark. The power flip didn't happen when the handcuffs clicked shut. It happened 10 minutes later in the hospital's secure tech audit room, where the reality of Rowan's golden child masterpiece was finally stripped bare. Detective Carver sat across from me, a sleek, encrypted laptop open between us. My mother, Marlene, stood in the corner, her face a ghostly, white mask of dawning horror as she watched the digital ghost of her favorite daughter materialize on the screen. Rowan had been led away, still screaming that I was pathetic, but her own files were about to tell a much more calculated story. We've bypassed the encryption on the server linked to the transmitter in your arm. Avery, Carver said, her voice dropping into a professional, lethal calm. Rowan wasn't just tracking your location to keep you safe. She was running a total immersion surveillance operation. She turned the screen toward me. My heart stopped. There, in a folder labeled Avery Management, were dozens of subfolders organized by year. They contained recordings from hidden microphones in my bedroom, transcripts of my private therapy sessions, and a spreadsheet that meticulously tracked my heart, rate, and sleep patterns via the sub-dermal chip. The mirror paradox was finally laid out in black and white. Rowan had been using my physiological data to time her gaslighting sessions. If the chip reported I was having a panic attack, she would show up at my door minutes later to comfort me, reinforcing the idea that she was the only one who truly understood my fragility. She wasn't a sister. She was a parasite who had hacked into my very nervous system to maintain her elite status. But the true shock hook was a document titled Project Victorian. It was a legal blueprint Rowan had drafted to have me declared mentally incompetent and placed under her permanent guardianship. The date on the final draft was 3 days from now, the day she was supposed to get married to her wealthy fiancé, Blake. Her wedding gift to herself was going to be the total liquidation of my autonomy and the seizure of Aunt Eleanor's estate. She had even written future notes detailing unfortunate accidents that would occur once I was safely tucked away in a private facility, ensuring the house would eventually pass to her alone. I didn't know, my mother whispered from the corner, her voice trembling. I thought she was just being protective. She told me you were getting worse, Avery. She said you were hearing things. I looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't feel the need to shrink. She told you I was hearing things because she was the one making the noise. Mom, I said, my voice steady despite the bruised edges of my soul. You protected a monster because it was easier than admitting your golden child was a predator. The power flip was absolute. I reached out and touched the screen, looking at the future notes Rowan had so confidently typed. She had planned for my silence, but she hadn't planned for her own violence to lead me to an X-ray technician. I wasn't the broken toy anymore. I was the witness who was about to dismantle her entire world. Detective Carver closed the laptop. Avery, based on this evidence, we're looking at felony stalking, aggravated assault, and industrial-grade privacy violations. Your sister isn't just going to jail for a birthday prank. She's going to be facing a forensic reckoning that will take years to untangle. I walked out of the room, leaving my mother standing in the digital debris of the family she had tried so hard to keep immaculate. The machine in the basement was finally out in the light, and the elite life Rowan had built was nothing but a hollow shell waiting for the demolition crew. The legal climax didn't unfold in a courtroom. It happened in the opulent, wood-paneled library of the Victorian estate, the very house Rowan had tried to steal. 2 days after the arrest, Detective Carver and a forensic data team were still extracting the dark secrets hidden within the walls. Rowan had been released on a massive bond, funded by my parents' retirement savings, and she had the audacity to show up with a high-priced lawyer, demanding access to her property to collect her wedding dresses. She still believed she could play the victim, her face composed into a mask of weary disappointment, as if I were the one causing a scene. But the power flip was already set in stone. Standing in the foyer was Blake, Rowan's fiancé, the elite catch she had spent years grooming. He wasn't holding flowers. He was holding the digital transcripts Detective Carver had authorized me to share. He looked at Rowan as she walked in, and for the first time, he didn't see a golden child, he saw the predator. "Blake, darling, thank God you're here," Rowan began, her voice a practiced melodic tremble. "Avery has gone completely off the deep end. She planted some kind of tracker and is trying to frame me for—" "I read the logs, Rowan," Blake interrupted, his voice like cold glass. "I read the future notes. I saw the entry from 6 months ago where you discussed sedating me if I ever questioned why Avery was being committed to a facility." The room went deathly silent. The mirror paradox was gone. The man she had manipulated into her corner had finally seen the blueprint of his own eventual cage. He handed her back the engagement ring, not with anger, but with a profound, clinical disgust. "The wedding is off, and my father's firm will be representing Avery in the civil suit for the total recovery of the estate assets you've embezzled." Rowan's lawyer tried to intervene, but Detective Carver stepped forward, holding a fresh stack of warrants. "Ms. Dalton, we've finished the sweep of the guest house. We found the surgical kit you used, along with the anesthetic vials you stole from your previous employer's clinic. This was the forensic kill shot. It wasn't just a sisterly rivalry anymore. It was a premeditated criminal conspiracy. My parents arrived moments later, still trying to mediate, but they stopped at the threshold. They saw Rowan, no longer the polished bride-to-be, but a cornered animal screaming vitriol at the police. "You pathetic losers!" Rowan shrieked, her voice echoing through the rafters of the house Eleanor had left me. "I did everything for this family. I made us look perfect while Avery sat in the dirt. I earned this house." "You didn't earn anything, Rowan," I said, stepping into the center of the library. "You just stole the piece of everyone around you to build a throne for yourself." I turned to my parents, who were looking at me as if they were seeing me for the first time in 30 years. "The repairman is done fixing your messes. As of this morning, I have a permanent restraining order against Rowan, and I am filing for an emergency injunction to freeze the family accounts she's been using to pay for this defense." The legal climax was absolute. Rowan was led out of the Victorian estate in tears, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were the tears of a narcissist who had finally run out of people to lie to. The golden child was headed for a cell, and the parents who had enabled her were left standing in the wreckage of their own denial. I looked around the library, at the dust motes dancing in the afternoon sun, and realized that for the first time, the only person tracking my heartbeat was me. The silence that settled over the Victorian estate wasn't empty. It was the quiet, rhythmic breathing of a house that was finally free of its ghosts. 6 months after the digital unmasking, the sub-dermal chip had been removed, leaving only a small, faded scar that I viewed not as a mark of shame, but as a badge of survival. The glow wasn't about the massive civil settlement I won or the fact that Rowan was now serving a multi-year sentence in a state facility. It was the peace of knowing that my thoughts were finally my own. I spent the summer restoring the manor room by room, stripping away the layers of aesthetic perfection Rowan had forced upon it to reveal the sturdy, honest oak underneath. The mirror paradox had been permanently dismantled. I no longer looked for validation in the eyes of a family that had traded my safety for a golden child narrative. My mother, Marlene, reached out occasionally, her letters filled with a hollow, belated regret, but I didn't rush to reply. I had resigned from the role of the sensitive victim, and I wasn't accepting applications for a reunion. The most powerful moment of the resolution happened when I opened the doors of the estate as the Eleanor Center, a sanctuary for women recovering from narcissistic, family abuse, and digital stalking. I realized that the very technology Rowan used to imprison me could be the key to helping others find their way out. We installed a state-of-the-art security suite, but this time it was designed to protect the residents, not to track them. I stood on the porch one evening, watching the sunset bleed into the Pacific, and felt a stillness I hadn't known since childhood. Rowan had tried to hide me in the dark, but in doing so, she forced me to become the light that exposed her. She thought she was the director of my life, but she was just a minor character in a much bigger story, a story where I finally took the lead. The machine in the basement was gone. The elite facade had crumbled to dust, and for the first time in 36 years, the view was absolutely perfect.